Welcome to the Yearning Heart Podcast, where we discuss with everyday people our journeys towards love, our growth, and the yearnings of our hearts. Hello, and welcome to the Yearning Heart Podcast. I'm Jennifer Lear. I'm your host. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a author, educator, and the founder of Reconcile, which is a relationship reconstruction app. Our guest today is Miette, and Miette is a 22-year-old woman who goes to Eckhart College in Florida. And we are going to talk to her today about what she's learning about relationships. She comes from a blended family, and she talks a lot about the struggles and the specific challenges of coming from a blended family and wounds that left her with that she is working on repairing, and what she yearns for in relationships and her journey and growth path. So I hope you enjoy the episode. So we're going to talk today about some of what Miette has learned in her watching relationships, in her own relationships, in her parents' relationships, what her growing edge is in relationships, what she wants. And yeah, so Miette, when I bring this up, where do your thoughts immediately go?
I guess for me, I feel like I've constantly been trying to improve my intimate life, my way of looking at my friends' life and people around me, and kind of pulling and subtracting different things that I like, make me feel uncomfortable, and just kind of analyzing everything. I feel like there's always room to improve and learn about yourself and others. And so for me, I don't know, it reminds me of like kind of my journey and like how I have come and how I hope / am curious about how it'll continue.
Okay. So are you in a relationship right now?
I am.
And it's long distance?
Yes.
So tell me about that. What's it like for you doing a long distance as a young person? You're what, 22?
Yeah.
22. As a young person in a long distance relationship, what is that like for you?
Yeah. Well, in the past, this is my third relationship. And in the past, my first relationship, we broke up because we didn't want to do long distance. Because that kind of, we didn't, at the time, didn't think it was going to work and weren't up for that commitment. And I believe that was a good decision. And then now I've kind of, like going into last summer, I had realized that I was ready to try a relationship again and to see what it was like. And it started out, we were kind of just taking it as it went. And then when it came to me having to come to school, which is across the country, I kind of realized that I wasn't ready to end the relationship, and it was something that I wanted to keep pursuing. Definitely, I had my fears, and I think the biggest thing for me kind of ties into like watching my parents and my relationship with my parents. I have a tendency to have trust issues, and so that was really the biggest thing for me. That was something that was holding me back and make me worried because I didn't fully trust my partner, and I think a lot of it came from past relationships with particularly males. So I think it was definitely scary, but I was really interested in trying it. And so we still have kind of decided to just take it as it comes and, communicate and really just see how it's working for both of us, and not putting any pressure or trying to stay open with each other. And I think I had to evacuate because of the 2 hurricanes that hit Florida. And in that time, I went home and I was there for about 3 weeks. And I stayed with my partner, and that was a really interesting and fun experience. Definitely, we started our relationship in the summer, and it was all kind of giddy, fun. Like, we didn't really need to do a whole lot of communicating, we thought, because it was just working well. And then when I got back, about 2 weeks in, I kind of started to realize my pet peeves about our relationship and just noticing little things that I didn't love. And I was kind of getting worried about continuing long distance. And so we did almost decide to break up because we're just like, I don't know if I can do it. And then we talked, and that was really helpful. And I realized that I just needed to learn how to kind of explain how I'm feeling fully. And that's something that it's this whole relationship, I've learned so much about myself and my habits. And it's been really, really nice.
So it sounds like the relationship is a little bit of a mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's sometimes annoying and then also really fun and interesting because
What's annoying for you?
well, it's kind of we're very similar in a lot of ways. Like our growing up, we're both older siblings, and just things we had to do and felt was our job. Were very similar, and that has made it so that we know when something's wrong, and we can also read each other very well.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, like when we are having our conversation about how we wanted to go on with our relationship, I didn't realize it, but I was kind of sugarcoating things, of like telling kind of a half truth, of kind of being like, like trying to make it all happy. And he was like, don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Like, tell me what you actually want to say, because that's what actually matters. And for me, I was like, I'm not doing that. And then I was like, hey, I actually am. So it was kind of like annoying in a way, because like it's really helpful, but it's also like, oh, like you know what I'm thinking in a way, and that sometimes I'm like, you're not supposed to.
Like you feel a little uncovered, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you talked about trust issues a little bit ago, and I'm wondering where that came from. I know both you and your boyfriend are from homes where there was divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that had an impact on you, on both of you. And then, of course, our history follows us forward into wherever our life is. And I'm just wondering how your parents impacted your understanding of relationships, what you do and don't want, your sense of trust.
Yeah, yeah. So, my mother and father like are very polar opposites in a lot of ways, which has been a blessing and a curse. And a lot of my trust issues come from my father, and I think a big part is feeling like, one, that I'm not like good enough, or like I'm constantly trying to impress him to get his attention.
Mm.
And then also throughout my sister and I's childhood, um, he would promise us things and like say things that we would really wanted to do or thought sounded really fun, and then those would change. And then just he had a lot of relationships, like girlfriends who, he had a habit of, or it was a pattern. He would be in a relationship for 2 to 3 years and then break up. And that really started to take a toll on me, especially just kind of having a second mother, and then having her, and then he'd be like, everything's gonna be the same, like we're just not in the same house. And then she would leave and get married and have kids. So that was just kind of, yeah, so it was just kind of like feeling not thought about, and getting what I needed and the support I needed. And then that had continued throughout my dating and intimate life, of choosing my first like relationship. It wasn't like my boyfriend, but relationship with a guy. He was very similar to my dad. Of I felt like I wanted to constantly impress him and have, he'd say things and then kind of go back on them. And it was in a way addicting, because there's that like kind of like golf where you don't get it in every time in the amount of time you want, but when you do, it's exhilarating, or like lottery or something. And that's kind of how it was with that relationship.
So
And
it sounds like it makes you a bit that you've been left with an insecurity,
yes.
and then you try to, make a connection happen. Like you really try, and if it doesn't happen, it's really disappointing. And if it does happen, you're elated, so that it's a little bit of a roller coaster because you aren't grounded in I'm okay and I'm valuable just the way I am.
Yeah.
Because your father left some wounds on you with you in some ways,
Yeah.
because his choices weren't necessarily good for you, or consider what your need, or didn't consider what your needs were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that I've actually only really recently, like this summer, realized kind of the full truth of that, and started to kind of accept that, because I've realized throughout the years that I am very much a person pleaser and will put people I care about and love first, and will do that at the cost of my own well-being and comfort. And so it's been really healing, but it's also been, I'll see, it's sad to me, because just noticing in the past, like since the summer, whenever I see like videos or TikToks or just daughters with their dads of this like very engaged father and going out of his way, it hurts to like know that I'll never have that experience.
Yeah.
But it's also something that, I can't change. I can't go back. I can only go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think moving forward and kind of finding a way to heal myself in other ways
Mm-hmm.
of not having that experience.
Right. So it's had a big impact, but you are working on moving through it and into health and growth and good relationships.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, this relationship has definitely, long distance is definitely hard. It's not something I'm a fan of.
Right.
But it's also, I think, allowed me to really think with myself and kind of think about the things that I need in a relationship or about a relationship, but without having that full distraction of the person.
Yeah.
I will FaceTime and talk, but they're not right there with you.
Yes, you won't lose yourself the same way,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
And so,
probably really good for you right now.
yeah. And I think it's definitely, and it has been hard, because in a lot of ways, it's my senior year, and in some ways I'm like, oh, am I missing out on kind of my last college experience of being free? And my last relationship was my freshman year, and it was a very unhealthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of ruined it for me. But then I was able to there's that kind of like, oh, I kind of miss freedom of like just not having to worry about anyone else. But then I also really care about my partner, and we've learned so much about each other and helped each other a lot. And so it's been a very interesting experience and fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. I'm happy that you're having a good relationship experience.
Yeah.
So, just in terms of your dynamics with your partner, just out of curiosity, because a lot of what I look at is attachment stuff and what people do in relationships. Now, you're early in this relationship, so a lot of the dynamics probably haven't emerged yet, but some of them have for sure. And that is often in a relationship, there's a person who sort of pursues the connection, and there's a person who tends to distance a bit because they aren't as in touch with their feelings. And that doesn't mean that's the case in your relationship. But I'm just curious if there's any dynamic that fits into how you each deal with your feelings and your needs in terms of communication. Does one pursue? Does one withdraw? Or is it pretty even?
I think it's more on the even side. I definitely, in the first, when like I first said that I love you, I was the first one to say that. And kind of before that, and then a little bit after that, we would like talk about it, and he's like, love's an action. And I was like, okay, like kind of just like sweeping it, like it doesn't mean that much. It's just an action. And I was like, well, for me, it means that like, you care about someone and love someone more than words can describe. And so it was kind of hard at first because it felt like I was more committed, and it was something that I really tried not to rush because in the past I have. And it was kind of like, and he waited to say it for about like a week or two. And then when he finally did, it was like a week before I left and to school. And we were kind of he was talking about his worries and concerns and how he was stressed out. And we were kind of just talking about that. And then after, he was just like, I really like, so amazing. And then he said that he loved me, and I was like, are you just saying that for shits and giggles? Like, and I was like, and he was like, no, because I was kind of like, oh, he's never gonna say it because it's just an action to him.
Right.
Yeah, and it was very kind of mind-boggling at first.
Well, you were vulnerable first,
Yeah.
which is scary.
Mhm.
Yeah, when you put yourself out there and you don't know what's going to come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely it has been, and then I have noticed when I came back to school and we started long distance, and we were talking about him coming to visit, and he was saying he was going to book a flight, and it took him like 3 weeks, and I saw had like past relationship issues of trust, of kind of promising and saying that they were going to do something and then not actually doing it. And so that became a big stressor for me, because I started to really question, like, is he actually as committed as he says he is? And am I, it was really hard for me the first few weeks of getting over my insecurities and my trust issues of, if he went out to the bar, I'd feel sick because I was like, oh, he's going to do something. And so I really had to work hard to remind myself, like, you can't just think of the worst case scenario. It's not fair.
Yeah.
And
Did
then to see, go
did
ahead.
you talk to him about your feelings?
Yeah. Yeah. And I did say, like, when he was picking, he'd go and hang out with his friends, and then he'd be like, oh, I'm going to do it tonight, and wouldn't get to it. And on like the fourth time, I was like, hey, like, I'm seeing old patterns that are really making me feel uncomfortable and stressed out. And I told him why, and he was very understanding, which was really helpful. One thing about this relationship is he'll actually, sometimes it's kind of like annoying because he'll be very truthful. He'll tell me the whole truth, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I actually didn't want to know the full truth, but I also am really glad.
It sounds like there's a lot of honesty between the two of you.
Yes.
Like
Yeah, and I think
no
that's
game playing.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, and that, like, going back to our parents, like, our parents kind of had that same dynamic of, at least from what I've seen, of my mom had really bad trust issues from my father. And then I had those bad trust issues also from my father. But then, the littlest thing, like a little white lie of anything that wasn't even a bad thing, my mom would get really mad and like, blow it out of proportion, at least I felt like. And I didn't understand why, because she didn't tell me till we actually went to therapy, because it was ruining our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of seeing, and it seems like for him, his mom has had the same experience with his dad. And so that's kind of an interesting kind of thing of like, you don't lie to my mom, and it's kind of the same for him. Like, and
Right.
so like I'm all my friends you could ask, I'm a horrible liar. I can't do it. Like even if I try, like you'll know I'm lying.
Right, right.
And I don't see that as a bad thing, but I think it's definitely something that has been really helpful in our relationship. Reassurance. And even when there's certain things that like make me feel uncomfortable, like when he tells me something, a truth about it, then sometimes I'm like, oh, that kind of made me feel icky, but like also I asked you to tell the full truth and you did, and that is really big.
Yeah. So that's a mixed thing. I mean, you're saying hearing the truth is more important than the momentary icky feelings
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
truth, that helps you trust,
Yeah.
even if it might be uncomfortable for a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so interestingly, you're 22 and people say, oh, that's so young. I'm pretty sure my mom got married at 22. And so lots of people get married before that,
Yeah.
so you might think, oh, this is just a young person, but actually people have kids at 18, 16. I mean, it's just,
Yeah. I was just talking about it with my one of my roommates. I was like, because I saw that a girl that I know, she's a few years older, but she's having her second kid, like, and she just had her first kid like a year and a half ago. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then like so many people that I know who are around my age range that are either pregnant or getting married,
right. Yeah.
which to me I can't imagine thinking about right now. But um,
Right.
yeah, it's a new era kind of
Yeah.
realizing and section in my life.
Yeah, well, people have different growth paths and different things to learn and different lessons. And, you're focused right now on having a good relationship and what that feels like and what that looks like and not repeating what your parents did.
Hmm.
Because I'm hearing through the lines that you don't want anything to do with what your parents did.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and that's something that, I feel really fortunate that I've had very different parenting styles throughout my life. My dad was the cool dad when it comes to like doing things, and there were not a lot of like boundaries or like no, like you can't go and do that. Like it was very fun. And then my mom was the complete opposite. And then when my mom remarried when I was very young, I don't really remember before.
How old were you? How old were you? Do
I
you think?
was 3.5, 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
yeah.
about a year after my parents' divorce. And that, like, definitely having a father figure who was a good, like, obviously he had his issues, but having someone who was there for me, sometimes even more than my mom or my dad,
Hmm.
was really helpful and a very special experience.
Hmm.
It was very like, and I think it was also to have his point of view of their dynamic and what he knows about like my father, and like obviously he's married to my mom. And so that's been really special and feels like a privilege because I've been able to kind of, and I in a lot of ways I tell people how I feel like the dynamic in my childhood, of having these three parents has formed me to be the person I am today, because
Right.
I had so many different views and way of living your life and parenting that I could take from, and then also realize, oh, like dad does this and mom says it's really horrible, but is it actually that horrible? Like kind of questioning it, instead of like when I got to school seeing parents who, or seeing my friends' parents who were still together and had healthy relationships and things that I was like, oh, that's a little that's a little off, like, and just seeing that kind of dynamic, and sure, it made it difficult.
So you're saying the relationship with your stepfather has been healing,
Yes.
but then also getting perspective from your friends and how their parents relate has
Mhm.
been sort of opened up new ways of looking at things, looking at relationships and what you like and what you don't like. Is that what you're?
Yeah, kind of like having, I guess I kind of take it like I all around, like, I guess just in general with people, I don't like to base my thoughts about something on one side, because I saw that with my step siblings. Their mother and father have a very unhealthy dynamic, and that was took a toll on our childhood, because there was a lot of hate and anxiety and frustration surrounded that relationship,
Yeah.
and it caused a lot of arguments. And um, so I kind of, but then I also was, they're going to be biased, and everyone has a bias. And I think I really learned throughout their relationship and how it affected me. I never wanted to judge something from one person's
Right.
perspective.
So you're saying this is your stepfather's ex-wife's relationship
Yes.
with her children, which are your
Yes.
step siblings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it sounds like it was sort of hard to watch.
Yeah. Definitely, it really affected our family dynamic. There was a lot of not being able to trust. Like, it took me till I was almost 17 for my stepbrother to um, trust me, and
Wow.
like actually be able to talk to me about, like, it was, you didn't talk about their mom around them, because it was such a negative thing, that it was, obviously it's their mother, they love their mother, like,
Right.
no matter how uncomfortable or traumatic it's been, whatever that is, like, you're gonna love them no matter what.
Right.
And I have my own experience with that, and so that's something that they didn't want, to constantly have someone bashing on their mother.
Right. Right.
And so it took a while for them to be able to talk to me, and kind of have that connection of, like, I'm not going to go and rat you out to the parents,
Right.
like,
So they could actually talk to you about their lives and their experience without feeling like you were going to do something that meant they had to protect their mother from you. So
yeah,
in other words, they were in protect mother mode.
exactly.
And until they knew that you weren't going to, if they told you mom did this or I felt this, they didn't want to hear you attack their mother. And until they felt like you would just listen and listen to their perspective, they weren't really willing to open up.
Yeah.
Is that sort of right?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And so I think throughout that of hearing, like, I've only had a few interactions with their mom, and they've been very brief.
Mhm.
And but having their perspective of both sides, and obviously that's going to be biased too, but even just having that, like, really made me realize that, like, not one person is right. Like,
Uh,
they're both going to have.
a way of seeing things. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because what you're talking about is the complexity of blended families. And I mean, you grew up in a very, very complex situation because you have a stepdad, you have a mom and a dad who are not together, a mom and a stepdad who are together, and then you have step siblings who have a mom who used to be married to your stepdad, I mean, you can hear the complexity that you've had to navigate through to sort of start finding, well, who am I in all this?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's been, like, helpful and also not helpful, and um but
Yeah.
it definitely makes me analyze people in a way of, like, I'm the kind of person in the class who kind of sits and listens and doesn't
Mhm.
do a lot of talking. that I feel like I do that just in life in general. Like, I mean, I can definitely be talkative and I love talking, but I also love analyzing and
You're an observer. You like to
yeah,
observe and figure
yeah,
out what's going on, it sounds like.
yes.
Yeah. So let me just ask you, because we've talked all over the place about all kinds of interesting things, but what are you yearning for? Like, what is your ultimate love goal?
One thing that I am very sure of and have really been able to think about that I haven't in the past is if I have kids, what I want as a father figure for them.
Uh-huh.
So having someone who, I guess, no matter what, is gonna love and put their kids first.
Right. So you're not just going to get swept away for someone who you fall in love with if he's not going to be a good father.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then also trust. Like, trust is a big thing. And also just having someone who's wanting to just, like, do fun things and adventures and keep life interesting. Like, I don't really want to be a stay-at-home mom who, I want us to be together in our relationship in a way that we're both very engaged with each other's life and but also have our own life.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
I
good.
think that's something that I'm still figuring out and um, understanding more and learning about every day.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been really interesting and I just am so fascinated. I'm a humanities major, and
Hmm.
so that major is kind of looking at people and questioning and just looking at things at a deeper level. And this
Hmm.
semester actually has been my first semester that I've had majority all humanities courses.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
And so that's been really eye-opening to kind of also realize why I do certain things and feel more included in, because in a lot of ways I've been like, oh, I feel like I'm the only one, which is silly of me, but like feels like I'm the only one who has these questions and
Mhm.
is analyzing everything on a deeper level than like, oh yeah, this is just my best friend, like,
Right. Right. Right.
and I think it's been a super awesome experience.
Cool. Now, I have one more question before we stop, and that is this idea of emotional safety, which is connected to trust. And I'm bringing it up because it's such an important thing in relationships. And it sounds like you're developing more emotional safety with your current partner, where you are realizing you can say what you need to say, and he will say what he needs to say, and nobody's going to go, squawking out the door, running away because you made a mistake or you upset them or something like that. And I'm
Hmm.
just wondering about your thoughts about how emotional safety fits into your life right now.
Yeah, I think a big thing has been this past summer has been really hard with my relationship with my dad. And he has gotten to know my dad really well this summer and has spent a lot of time with me and him. Um, and in the beginning, it was really hard because, I'd have experiences with my dad that made me really sad or mad or frustrated. And he'd kind of be like, they saw him as like this cool, fun person. Like, why would you think he's horrible or like whatever? Like, not that he's horrible, but like doing these things, like,
Right,
doesn't
right.
sound that bad.
They didn't see the bad part of how it affected you negatively.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was really hard at first. And in a way, I felt like kind of like I was on my own. But then over time, I've, I've noticed that when I talk about these things, like if I have lunch or dinner with my dad and, he's like, how was your day? And I was like, oh, I had dinner with my dad and it was really hard. Like he wasn't, whatever, he wasn't interacting the way I wanted or It was really frustrating. I didn't feel heard. Even if he doesn't say much, I can tell that he understands and is able to separate his experience with my father with my experience.
So he can listen and accept your experience, even if it's not his experience,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
really important in a relationship. That's so important. And
Yeah.
that feels good to you, it sounds like.
It does. It's relieving. It's relieving to not, because it's exhausting to have to constantly, to update someone on my whole life or even just a year of what I've gone through. And even I forget about some things.
Yeah.
But to have kind of that ability to talk to someone and just be able to say the things and have him understand, but not have to ask questions or be like, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, just to have that kind of space where I can talk about it and feel listened to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's really nice and
yeah.
important. Thank you for joining me in this podcast. I hope you found it both interesting and informative. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. You can also find me on social media, usually under Reconcile. And just a reminder that we have a relationship app called Reconcile out to help you create your best relationship. And it's in both the Apple App Stores and the Google Play Stores.